So, based on what we discussed just now, what would be the difference between the three types of practitioners, quote unquote, that the suttas talk about? And how would you practically, how would that practically manifest somebody's day-to-day training?
Three types, you mean?
Yeah.
Which means?
So there's faith type, samādhi type, and wisdom type, I guess you would call it.
Well, maybe one difference between the faith type and the wisdom type will be like the faith kind of understood to some degree some sort of instruction, and you just stick to it kind of regardless of what his mind shout at him. To kind of refine this understanding, you just keep to it. Where like the wisdom type will have kind of a tendency to try to dig more, like what does it actually mean and how refined I should be doing that. Maybe that could be one difference.
So does that mean that, is there any, would there be any fixed characteristic of like pleasant or unpleasant for one of them?
Yeah, I was kind of going to say maybe they would almost be characterized by the dominating hindrances, basically, to some degree.
Well, both of those, yeah, would be mainly characterized by the hindrances. Yeah. So, like.
Well, probably the samadhi would be the most pleasant. That's also what it's.
So basically, was faith type and wisdom type. It could be pleasant or unpleasant. Probably it would be unpleasant. Because having faith doesn't necessarily mean that they are not acting out of hindrances. You can be having faith and still be, inclining more towards the direction of engagement in other ways. Whereas the wisdom type would be inclining probably towards engagement in the form of overthinking things. So that means then that so what would they each have to do?
Well, the wisdom type, let's say, refrain from trying to clarify things on their own terms, let's say, like the thoughts or doubts they would present.
But is that where they would begin?
Excuse me?
Is that where they would begin?
Begin? Or the training?
Begin the kind of rebalancing of their efforts.
I'm not sure I understand what you're
saying. Like, is that the first point where the restraint begins?
No, obviously the priest.
Yeah. So because see, the wisdom in and of itself, even if they're not aware of it, would come with the implication that if I can just understand this,
right? Okay.
It doesn't matter so much.
Yeah. No. Of course.
The stuff.
Unless you have perfected the precepts and are living sense restraint and what's called mindful of your intentions, living in seclusion, and all of that. Yeah, that would be the prerequisite for either of the three types. Basically, it's not negotiable.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, like, still, more often than not, there would be a need to refine their understanding of what that training means, especially since they will see that the practice is still being unpleasant. And they're not clear why. It's not that like they're knowingly kind of there is some external reason because of which they're engaging and they know that once that finishes they'll go back. No, it's like even if they wanted the practice not to be unpleasant, they don't know how. Well, that means probably if they think they're keeping all these prerequisites, then they probably need to refine their conception of what it means to be sense restrained, what it means to be not giving into unwholesome states, what it means to be in seclusion, all these things. And their task would be then to rebalance themselves and like I was saying before, create the suitable basis for all these ideas to be seen on the level where they need to be seen, which is a mind that has been, again, de-agitated on account of renunciation, not on account of something else. Now, what would the samadhi type have to do? What would be their setback?
Kind of laziness, I guess. Or
laziness?
Well, indulging, I guess, if you could say, in that peaceful
But can you indulge in a state of renunciation?
Well, no, I mean more like kind of
relaxing,
let's say.
Is it that they need to give up the samadhi, as some people would think?
No. But they would need to bring up maybe things to think about. Like that.
Well, that too, but what more specifically would be like, what is it that a practitioner can become, like the Buddhist teachers reaching like the final arupa attainments, like just the limit of where self-view goes, like if just one more he would have been extinguished. So why is it that whereas a Sotapanna who actually understands, he might not even be like even in the first jhana, so why is it that there can be that huge discrepancy? What does,
because he's still delighting in his attainment and you need to learn how to relinquish that.
But is it like a conscious, like kind of sensual delight, like it's usually happening with the absorption states that people develop? Or of course there is delight for anybody who hasn't freed themselves from craving, but when you say that way, it would almost sound like it's a very obvious sort of like infatuation with it or something. But the thing is, you get there by giving up like this coarse kind of intoxication with anything, pretty much.
Well, I guess maybe in a way taking that for granted, taking that state to be your result, to be your goal of the practice.
Take it to be yours.
Yeah, but sure, those are broader kind of like in theoretical terms, but more specifically, like what is it that they're not seeing? Basically, let's put it that way.
Yeah. So you're asking, what is it that
what is it that the practitioner who has like more samadhi than an arhat? What is it that he doesn't see? What is the kind of small implication that they will still carry, no matter how kind of deeply they go in that direction?
Integrate that thing, you mean?
In general, just what's the wrong assumption?
That's the self-view, which is the
yeah, of course, but what how would that practically manifest, like in that specific example? Is it that just like you tell them, like, so could do you think that you could have somebody who has cultivated samadhi, and they know that there is no self, quote unquote? Do you think that would automatically make them be an arhat?
Well, I don't know.
Because you could just take it as information and then see like, oh yeah, of course, I already knew that.
Yeah, but assuming that whole yoniso development has been there, because otherwise they wouldn't be having that samadhi to begin with.
Yeah, I know, but okay, let's put it this way. Imagine you meet that kind of person. Like they have been, on account of some wrong view, like in the Buddhist time, some fire worshipper or something like that, or some Brahma some
So
Brahman.
they're living perfectly restrained.
Yeah.
In solitude.
More
They're
than
more-
than an arahant. Like more secluded, more withdrawn than an arahant.
Mhm.
What kind of instruction would you give them for them to actually kind of?
Well, that they haven't escaped the round of birth, basically.
Okay, but what does that mean?
Well, that they haven't fundamentally uprooted being.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
but
It's still an activity. Like, still, kind of the jhana is still volitionally produced, so they still kind of rely on some sort of very subtle, of course, but still an activity.
okay, but how do they stop doing that? Did they just I'm not gonna?
No, they need
Reliance.
to contemplate that any activity is a burden. Like any form of activity, regardless of how subtle it is, regardless, like the whole picture of it is kind of a burden, regardless.
Mm-hmm. And what would be the goal of that discernment?
Non-attachment to the pleasure, even of those states.
And
Then it's done.
okay, but what other? See, the thing is, there's something more specific there
Mm-hmm.
that is problematic. Something that they wouldn't be seeing.
Somebody who goes all the way to what is it, neither
Yeah.
perception or non-perception, but as practitioner.
Yeah.
And now you're asking, what is it that they are not seeing?
That they can get something.
Yeah, but what is it that like? What is it that they take for granted? Let's say. As important.
Well, for example,
Well, that thing itself, that life. Well, yeah.
See
Well,
why
the peaceful
is
mind.
it? Why let's say
Yeah.
why is it? Let's phrase it this way. Why is it that the fetter of Siddhabhata Paramasa wouldn't be overcome in the because Siddhabhata Paramasa doesn't just mean the rites and rituals that we often say. It's the right virtue, the right duties of being secluded, restraining your speech and all this stuff that would factually lead to this peaceful states.
Is it like I have to do it?
Yeah, but like,
I have to keep those things. I have to engage.
the thing is, if you just stop thinking I am this, like,
No, but
they can easily kind of, okay. Because see, they have already developed a degree of giving up. So it's like they can even think that that's what they're already doing. So you have to phrase it in more accurate terms that would like directly cut through their assumption and the thing that they're emphasizing. And I think I actually already mentioned it a few times, but it seems it didn't fully make the connection between.
Is it to make them recognize that this state is like dependently a reason?
Yeah, but like, let's not put the emphasis on the states. Let's say,
how they are living their lives.
No.
Right. That even this state that they have developed is dependent on this lifestyle. That taking for granted the given state of affairs the way that it is, basically like a healthy body, for example.
Yes, that would bring them closer to
Yeah,
it.
so then they don't see impermanence fundamentally.
Yeah, well, they see impermanence in regard to everything else except this. Like, they have reached that state by seeing the impermanence of sensual pleasures, because the suttas describe, like, these ascetics, not during the Buddha's time, but before, they would factually, like, reach the Brahma realm and so on, because they develop the understanding of sensuality as impermanent. They would be preaching that as their Dhamma, but it would stop there.
Yeah. So
they would see the impermanence of that too, but now the point is, like, sure, that's just an answer that somebody can read the sutta and they just say, oh yeah, they need to see that state too as impermanent. But what I'm saying is, what is it that you could point them to like really make sure that their understanding is impermanent? Because they could just assimilate that view and say, oh yeah, of course, it's impermanent because.
Yeah, so then it stays on the level of information.
Yeah. So how would you tell them, like, if you understood it as impermanent, if you actually understood it as impermanent, what would happen?
Well, it would be complete dispassion.
which would mean that
Freedom from suffering.
They don't care whether that state even comes back or not.
exactly. So that's what I was trying to get to. So like they will still be carrying the implication that even if they think they're free from suffering, because the suttas would say, like Bahia and stuff, he was exactly in that position where he was. It probably unthinkable that he would have been thinking that unless he had developed his mind in these ways. But unless they recognize that actually it doesn't matter. Because you can have all the views of like, oh yeah, it's impermanent and it's like this and it's like that. But as long as there's that implication that only if I have this will I be in the right kind of position, will I be practicing rightly, to that extent you haven't understood that this is not worth holding on to and it's not where the purity comes from. And for as long as that's the case, you will also have Siddhavata Paramasa. Because your peace will depend, like you said, on the lifestyle that enables the state. So it's not that virtue that they were keeping that would give rise to this was wrong and they should stop doing it. It's the fact that if they recognize that a peaceful mind isn't what freedom from suffering is, isn't what Nibbana is, if they were to understand that, they would keep the virtue with a completely different attitude. They would keep the virtue without any fear of what would happen if they don't keep the virtue, because they're not afraid of the agitated mind. But if their notion of peace is intrinsically bound up with this pure state that they have cultivated, inevitably they will be afraid of what will happen if they give up all of the right training that they've been cultivating and, let's say, not fully start engaging in sensuality or something, but just go back to 8 precepts and live in a crowded environment, which again an arahant could also do if there's some reason for it or some accident or something and they just can't live in the monastery anymore. Like if all these prerequisites were to be destroyed and the state were to be destroyed, they would feel like they lost their freedom because it was bound up with all this. And see, that's what it means to say that it's dependently arisen. But the problem is, like nowadays, these ideas are so kind of, when the Buddha said them, it was revolutionary. So like somebody hears that and they will be forced to think about it. It's like, oh yeah, what does he mean with that? But nowadays you just say to someone, and whoever has any inkling of spirituality would have heard that before. And they would just say, they might even have cultivated the state by practicing something like that. So they will think like, oh yeah, of course it's dependent. But no, it's like, accurately speaking, if you were to actually understand that, then why? Because they would realize, actually, sometimes I'm even prioritizing things that are necessary for this calm to come about, but are not fully indispensable to be free from diversion and delusion. Like avoiding all talk, avoiding all sleep, all speech. The Buddha didn't do that. So, avoiding criticizing others, because that would probably, and avoiding discussions and kind of engaging in in-depth conversations about Dhamma. The Buddha didn't avoid those things because he understood that even when the mind would get slightly kind of fall back basically from the state of samadhi that depends on seclusion, he wouldn't suffer on account of this. But somebody whose sense of identity literally depends on having that withdrawn mind all the time, they would feel like, oh yeah, I always need to be living this super tight lifestyle of not just, again, the precepts, but like all of this other layers of withdrawal added to it. So, and that's why then the Buddha told Mahakassapa that, oh, just come back and live in the palace, because you don't need the seclusion and the like living in that cave where he was, that he had to
like
walk up.
Your job is done.
Yeah, he had
so
to like walk up this huge hill just to reach that cave where he was living, like completely withdrawn from people. And then he said it's for the example, to give a good example to next generations, and for his pleasant abiding here and now, that he would continue to do it, because he realized, oh yeah, inevitably, even being an arahant, if we were to go back to that more engaged lifestyle, and meeting people all the time and all this stuff, that pleasant abiding would deteriorate. But see, it didn't say like, oh, I won't do it because I need this.
No, so in his case, it was just a preference.
Yeah.
But
if for some reason he got sick and he had to not live up there anymore and just live in a more crowded place, he wouldn't suffer, even if then his samadhi deteriorates.
Yeah, so there's basically, and it also, so there would be no fear, as you mentioned earlier. And that sometimes indeed also the sutras say, like free from greed, hatred and illusion, and fear.
Yeah. So, because if there's anything that you hold on to, even if it's the things that are beneficial for the practice, to that extent you will suffer. It's a better attachment than all the others, because this one takes you closer to Nibbana rather than away from it. But if you just stay there, it's kind of like you just moved all the way to like the crossing point, and then you stay there. You could have just, but no, you just stay there, and then you die. And I guess nobody tells you like, wait, no, just one step more forward. Don't stop. Then there's no indication, like you're not suffering anymore. So why would you keep trying to do anything more?
But so there's this sutta, I think it's a Samyutta somewhere, there's this sick monk basically dying, I think, and the Buddha comes and he asks him how he's doing, and he's like, yeah, I'm not doing very well. And he says, okay, well, I hope you're at least free from remorse. And I said, no, I'm not free from remorse. And he
because
said, why?
Samadhi,
well, because I fell away from the thing. So are you saying that monk did not even have the right view? Or could someone with the right view?
No, there could still be
there
could still be some slight emphasis of that only when it's because there's still conceit and kind of identification with the aggregates, so they could still have a sense that they need to have peaceful mind in order to of course they would see through it, like if eventually they would, that's the difference, like if they were just to practice long enough, it would become clear that they have to apply the same principle of I think they just wouldn't be able to hold on to it to anywhere near the same degree as somebody who doesn't have the right view. But yeah, that's why it does say that once they develop it well enough, then they need to contemplate that that's also impermanent and all that. Not because they are like the other person implying that it's actually eternal. Like those Brahmas, they would actually have the view that like, no, this is kind of overdoing the kind of finding safety in it. They know that there is, like as to say, somebody accomplished in view is incapable of taking any sankhara as permanent, any sankhara as pleasant, and any dhamma as self. So they cannot have the view that it's otherwise. But there can still be, just by not being fully clear, that it's like not just impermanent, but as it says, it's like a dart, a boil, an arrow. It's a calamity, a disaster. Then they aren't fully. They aren't fully turned away from the entire extent of the aggregates, basically.
So back to your question of what does a faith type and a wisdom type and a samadhi type, what do they have to do in order to overcome the
shortcomings?
Corresponding shortcomings, yeah. Would a sort of simple answer to that be to try to understand what the other two types are and to try to emulate them?
In a way, that could be a good way to look at it, because it would be like if actually no, there's even that sutta where it says somebody who is accomplished in discernment should go and ask somebody who is accomplished in calming how to calm the mind. Somebody who is accomplished in discernment in calm should go and ask somebody. It says, how should you regard sankharas in order to develop discernment, basically. And so that would be the way to kind of fill out the things that they haven't sufficiently cultivated. So in the case of the wisdom type, it would just be like, okay, how do I kind of keep myself in check not to drift away into some sort of random distractions, even if they seem justified, of like thinking about Dhamma and stuff. Or the faith type distractions of, who knows, like helping the teacher or something. Just overly kind of like, oh, let me take care of this. Do you want me to renew the Hokuti, or do you want a new
walking path?
Do you want a new bathroom? So then for the samadhi type, then it would just be like actively clarifying the nature of their experience in such a way that even when they're not at peace, they still wouldn't suffer. To kind of take away the emphasis from the peace and see like, no, how can I not suffer even amidst suffering, so that even if I were to just again completely like live in this crowded environment in a hospital or something, that even then I wouldn't suffer. How could I see myself? How could I develop such understanding that I don't suffer even when I'm going around left and right like this other guy does?